There are many aspects which define who and what we are, but nothing is more defining than the power of memories. Indeed, memories are a remarkable gift, one which allows us to venture back into the depths of time and to relive, however briefly, a moment from our past. Yet memory is never truly black or white. It is a fickle mistress, forever tainted by our own changing perspectives, by the influences of others, and by the ravages of time itself. And do you know what I find even more fascinating? There is a distinct correlation between memory and emotion. Indeed, when the emotional impact of a memory leaves a lasting impression, the memory itself grows exponentially in its potency, becoming more vivid, clearer than any other. Yes, I can still remember the days from when I was but a cub, nestled at grandfather's side on a star-filled night. With the heat of the fire warming my fur, he often spoke about the planet and the lifeblood that flows through it. As we are born from the planet, so too shall we return. Death is never the end. Even though we may lose someone, their memories, their stories are forever preserved, not just in the minds of others, but within the flowing currents of the Lifestream. Care to hear such a memory? Shinra was built on a foundation of blood, sweat, and tears, those of my own and those of my enemies. Long ago, back before we were known as a supplier of Mako energy, we began life as a humble weapons manufacturer, expert craftsmen producing high-quality weaponry and combat essentials. I instilled two key principles into my company, ideals that would eventually evolve into our mission statement. All products made by Shinra Works had to be serviceable, and more importantly dependable in the heat of battle. Nothing like the shoddy, quick-rusting equipment that you can find in any flea-bitten backwater town. With terrifying monsters roaming the plains, mere traversal could be difficult for anyone but the most hardened traveler. But that was where Shinra Works stepped in. A beacon of light in the shadows, we provided the masses with the means to better protect themselves. All for a modest fee, of course. Now, I do not like to brag, but our weapons quickly became known as the essential tool for any serious journeyman or explorer. But it wasn't only our weapons that achieved such high accolade. Our range of bangles could provide superior protection against the razor-sharp teeth of, say, a Nebel wolf, or against the tridents of a Sahagin. You must understand, such advancements require months of practical testing, real-life scenario application, which results in numerous trial and errors. But you can rest assured, we prepared adequate severance packages for the families of all those employees killed during the testing of our initial efforts. And so, the gil began pouring in, and the branding of Shinra became the gold standard for combat equipment. A little something we discovered decades earlier. Mako energy is an abundant source of fuel which courses through the veins of the planet. It was a simple matter of developing the right equipment that could easily siphon this energy and reutilize it for our needs. We began installing our reactors in key locations around the world, powering towns, vehicles, and equipment. Think of it as a mere side business, if you will. Something that helped to fund the further development of our weapons. The Mako energy extraction process itself held no real significance. Yet. It would be difficult to pinpoint exactly what started it all. Perhaps it began as a minor border dispute, or some perceived slight that was taken completely out of context. Whatever the true nature and circumstances of its birth, the Great Intercontinental War was a massive shock to us all. It was a dark and bloody time, one which lasted for several years, with countless losses on all sides, as more and more people were inadvertently drawn into the ever-escalating conflict. For Shinra Works, however, such circumstances provided us with a more favourable outcome. Indeed, at the very height of the war, we experienced a 350% increase in the sales of all of our products. For a time, we were hard-pressed to keep up with supply and demand. Meanwhile, the Great Intercontinental War continued with no clear signs of abating. There was a near-constant outcry for Shinra Works to continue to provide the latest equipment for the most up-to-date technology and weapons of war that we could devise, as both sides attempted to gain the upper hand. It was then that I discovered the true nature and potential of Mako. For years I had been seeking a way to harness the full power of Mako energy, to weaponize it, to find a way to deploy it onto the field of battle. I eventually found a safe way to condense this energy, replicating a crystallization process which, though can occur naturally, takes far too long for our purposes, ultimately forging the Mako into a more tangible and viable product. Materia. I won't proceed to bore you with the specific details. That is something that the scientists in my employ are paid to understand. Some convoluted nonsense about materia being a conduit for harnessing the planet's different energy patterns, depending on minute changes undergone during the Mako energy crystallization process. That isn't important. What is important is an understanding of the practical applications of materia in the field, something that I alone immediately grasped. Through a series of extensive testing and some rather unfortunate accidents, we discovered that the exact power from the use of materia seemed to vary depending on the mental prowess and fortitude of the individual user. Regardless, the sheer combat potential was utterly undeniable. In a bold move that surprised even me, our scientists devised a way to shower our troops in Mako energy, heightening both their skills and combat capabilities. With our newly created elite troops known as soldiers, and armed with both materia and our latest equipment, we quickly dominated the battlefield, finally bringing an end to the senseless intercontinental war. It is said that I'm a shrewd and cunning man. Great traits that I cannot in all good conscience deny. You see, war is a highly valuable commodity, yet it is one with a severely limited lifespan. There comes a point where it eventually becomes bad for business, especially when your pool of clientele begins to rapidly diminish in size. Adaptation is the key to survival, and I already held in my possession the keys that I required. As the world slowly began to heal, the masses quickly relied on the Mako energy that we provided to improve their dreary livelihoods and regain a sense of normalcy. A commodity that we had already wormed into every facet of their mundane lives. Shinra Works was retooled into what became known as Shinra Electric Power Company, the only source and upkeep of Mako energy in the entire world. All my careful planning quickly bore fruit. Shinra Inc. had been positioned as being indispensable in this new post-war society. As the guild continued to pour in, we in turn continued to build more and more Mako reactors. Money was power, and I could throw as much gil at a problem as was required. There were, however, some small pockets of resistance. A few minor towns, of no real note, who were blind to even the most positive of changes in the name of progress. Running around with nonsensical and equally unsustainable ideals of heritage and independence. One such breeding flea pit was Wutai. Godo Kisaragi continued to decline my offer of building a Mako reactor on Wutai soil. Now, as you must know, I am not a man who will take no for an answer. I attempted to politely persuade Godo and make him see the errors of his obvious short-sightedness. But alas, we were held at a stalemate. And so a more direct approach was required. With more gil than I knew what to reasonably deal with, I was soon struck by the notion that Shinra needed a locale which more adequately befitted our status in the world. A towering monument to our brilliant ingenuity, our financial success, and our now global recognition. The sprawling metropolis known as Midgar rose up around the main headquarters for Shinra, a glorious building for all to covet. Midgar itself was powered through the use of 8 magnificent reactors, which in turn powered 8 distinctive towns which had naturally formed around our new home. The towns may have had some name or other at some point, but it became far easier to refer to each by their respective reactor number. And yes, I've heard those conspiracy theories. Usually by some layabout who fail to pony up their gil for the services and comfort that we provide them with. I can assure you, it was nothing to do with eroding the will and identity of the common people. The numbering of the towns was a natural evolution, a genuine matter of simplicity and ease. Midgar. A spectacular jewel in a sea of dust and dirt. Is it any surprise that people flocked to it? Wanted to work for Shinra, begging for scraps at our table, or hoping to bathe in the water that we had already washed in. For grunts such as these, the slums would do. But for those with more gil and influence, we offered luxury, a place on the upper plate itself. The running of Midgar was provided by a hand-picked selection of my most trusted advisors, individuals who had proven their worth over time. The head of public security, a rather more nuanced expression denoting our military arm, was run by my closest confidant, Heidegger. Though not possessing any intellect of note, and often prone to fits of uncontrollable rage, his loyalty, alongside the dedicated training of our troops, have often served me well. Cruel and highly ambitious, there is no one more suited to being the head of weapons development than this seductive lady in red. But do not let her plunging neckline fool you into complacency. She has a heart of ice, and is shrewder than she appears. Together, we have developed some incredible weapons, and made several advances within robotic armaments, a future range of techno-soldiers. Efforts to chart the stars may not have been one of my highest priorities, but it was an interesting avenue to pursue, especially in the search of more sources of Mako energy. Run by a rather obese and sweaty man, Palmer is the head of our space program. Our final executive is the head of urban development, a lanky individual by the name of Reeve, though I must say, he's a man who would certainly benefit from being in possession of a more solid backbone. Then there is the head of our science research division. Now it was often said, not to his face mind you, that Hojo was an inferior man forced to take on the work of a far greater mind. But that twisted mind, along with more twisted morals, allowed us to push the boundaries of known science to its limits. together, we developed Midgar into something glorious. One of the more unfortunate side effects from the use of our reactors is that the Mako energy available within the immediate vicinity of a reactor will, over time, eventually dry up and become depleted. Yes. Was that what they were called? Avalanche. Some insignificant terrorist group who kept spreading lies about my company. Some nonsense about how we were knowingly destroying the planet with our Mako reactors. We may have encountered them on a few occasions. Nothing but ants. But true enough, several ants working together can indeed desecrate your party. We soon put plans into place to bring them down. Avalanche wasn't what was important here. What we needed to focus on was the end game. The eventual loss of Mako energy for our reactors in Midgar. Remember, adaptation is the key to survival. To combat this, I took the first steps in securing our future, what I dubbed the Neo-Midgar project. Through the use of one with both the knowledge and ancestry of the Cetra, the Ancients, we will force her to use her skills for the betterment of mankind, to show us the way to the Promised Land, a land which is said to be overflowing with abundant Mako energy. It is there that I will build the new seat of Shinra power, Neo-Midgar. Unfortunately, it was a plan that I would not live to see come to pass. A pity. All those carefully laid plans, all the hopes and dreams that I harbored, my legacy, it now resides in the hands of my wayward son, within Rufus Shinra. Make me proud, my son. The legacy of Shinra is one that will not be so easily forgotten. But, by listening to his memories, we can begin to understand the man behind the company and his burning motivations. And, most important of all, we can take what we have learned and never again repeat the mistakes of the past. Like the butterfly effect, we are still dealing with the fallout from decisions made from a time so long ago. Decisions which gradually led us to where we are today, ultimately leading us to the first steps in the fight to protect the planet from Shinra, and the battle against the one known as Sephiroth, and the calamity from the skies. But that is a memory for another time. We hope you enjoyed experiencing this memory with us. If you would like to see more of this content, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to hit the bell icon to be instantly notified when new content arrives. Consider becoming a Patreon, or sign up to offer help us as an artist, writer, or a video editor to enable us to continue our efforts. Until next time.